Have you ever wondered how little we truly know about the people standing right in front of us? Every single day, we encounter individuals who seem warm, kind, even perfect. But appearances, they can be beautifully deceptive. Behind that radiant smile may hide a storm of insecurity. Behind those confident words, a fragile self-worth quietly trembles. Consider this. You meet someone at a party. They're charming, articulate, making everyone laugh. 6 months later, you're working with them on a project, and they completely fall apart under pressure. What changed? Nothing. You simply saw them in a different context. Or think about that colleague who always seems so put together, so reliable. But then you notice how they speak to the cleaning staff, how they react when their coffee order is long, how they handle a delayed flight. Suddenly, the facade begins to crack. In a world obsessed with image, where surface often matters more than substance, the masks people wear can easily overshadow who they really are. But here's what most people don't realize. There's actual psychological science behind why certain behaviors reveal true character. You see, while everyone talks about the same 2 ways to read people, they're missing the why behind it. They're missing what these behaviors actually reveal about someone's deepest psychological patterns. What if I told you that the way someone treats a waiter isn't just about kindness? It's actually revealing their attachment style, formed in childhood, that governs every relationship they'll ever have. What if keeping promises isn't just about integrity, but about specific brain patterns that neuroscience can now measure? What if I told you that researchers have discovered that in just 7 seconds of observing these behaviors, you can predict someone's relationship patterns, their stress responses, and even their likelihood of success in leadership roles? The truth is, there are 2 simple yet powerful aspects that reveal a person's true character. But the real game changer, understanding the psychology behind why these work. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." He understood something profound. Human behavior follows patterns, and these patterns run much deeper than what meets the eye. Modern neuroscience has proven him right. We now know that the way people behave in seemingly insignificant moments is actually controlled by ancient brain systems, systems that were wired in childhood and continue to operate largely outside of conscious awareness. Imagine having the ability to see beyond words, to read the silent language of the unconscious mind, to detect not just authenticity, but to understand the deeper psychological forces that drive someone's behavior. Imagine understanding why your friend always cancels plans at the last minute, why your partner shuts down during arguments, why your boss takes credit for your work, why that person you're dating seems perfect one day and distant the next. It's all connected, and it all shows up in these 2 crucial moments. Once you recognize these patterns and understand what they really mean, you'll never see people the same way again. And maybe, just maybe, you'll see yourself more clearly, too. Today, we're going beyond surface-level observations. We're diving into cutting-edge research from 2024, attachment theory, and Jungian psychology to understand what these behaviors actually reveal about the human psyche. This isn't just about judging people, it's about understanding them at the deepest level. Are you ready to see people and yourself through the lens of psychological science? Let's begin. The first way to see someone's true character is deceptively simple. Observe how they treat people who can't return the favor. Think about it. When someone interacts with a waiter, a janitor, a stranger asking for directions, or someone who made a small mistake, what do they have to gain? Nothing. There's no promotion waiting, no business deal to close, no social status to earn. In these moments, the mask comes off. An empathetic person shows no distinction. Their kindness isn't performative, it's part of who they are. They thank the barista with the same warmth they'd show their boss. They're patient with the receptionist having a difficult day. They offer genuine help to the lost tourist, even when they're running late. But watch someone who looks down on those in less powerful positions. You'll often see something else entirely. The impatient sigh when service is slow, the failure to make eye contact with the cleaning staff, the way they speak to customer service representatives when something goes wrong, the dismissive tone with anyone they perceive as beneath them. This isn't just bad behavior. It's a window into their soul. You see, arrogance toward the powerless often masks deep insecurities. It reveals an unresolved relationship with the self, a distorted need to feel superior, because deep down, they fear being insignificant. These moments, small, easily overlooked, are some of the most telling interactions you can observe. Because when there's nothing to gain, what's left is who they really are. Watch how they respond when their coffee order is wrong. Do they blame the teenager behind the counter? Or do they recognize that mistakes happen? Notice their reaction when the elevator is being held by maintenance staff. Do they show irritation? Or do they offer a genuine no problem and take the stairs? Observe their behavior when someone drops papers in front of them. Do they walk past? Or do they pause to help? Psychologists agree. These behaviors are often more revealing than grand, dramatic gestures. Because in moments where there's nothing to gain, our truest nature emerges. But here's what most people miss. This behavior pattern runs much deeper than simple kindness or rudeness. What you're actually witnessing is the manifestation of psychological patterns that were set in motion decades earlier. And that's where the real revelation begins. Now, here's what changes everything. Understanding why these interactions are so revealing. What you're witnessing in those service moments isn't just politeness or rudeness. You're seeing someone's attachment system in action. And that system, it was wired in childhood and continues to operate largely outside conscious awareness. Let me explain what's really happening in the brain during these encounters. According to groundbreaking attachment research, the way we relate to others, especially those in vulnerable positions, directly reflects the internal working models we developed with our earliest caregivers. When someone encounters a service worker, 3 distinct patterns emerge. The hyperactivated pattern. These are people whose attachment system goes into overdrive. You'll notice them over-activated. To waiters, seeking excessive reassurance from staff, or becoming disproportionately upset when service isn't perfect. This isn't just about being sensitive. It's their nervous system desperately seeking validation from everyone around them, a pattern that typically develops from inconsistent caregiving in childhood. The deactivated pattern. Watch for the person who maintains perfect politeness but with emotional distance. They'll say thank you, but never make eye contact. They'll tip appropriate but treat the interaction like a sterile transaction. This isn't rudeness, it's a protective strategy. Their attachment system learned early that emotional connection can be dangerous, so they've trained themselves to keep everyone, including service workers, at arm's length. The balanced pattern. These individuals show natural, appropriate warmth. They're genuinely present in the interaction, neither over-involved nor disconnected. They treat service workers as fellow human beings without drama or defensiveness. This reflects a secure attachment system that learned trust and appropriate boundaries early in life. But there's more. Recent research from 2024 reveals something fascinating about how our brains process power imbalances. When someone encounters a person in a service position, specific neural pathways activate, pathways that have nothing to do with the present moment and everything to do with ancient survival mechanisms. Studies show that people who treat service workers poorly often have hyperactive dominant circuits in their brain. Their anterior cingulate cortex, the region responsible for social status monitoring, goes into overdrive when they encounter someone they perceive as body. Lower status. But here's the crucial insight. This reaction isn't about the service worker at all. It's about the person's own internal relationship with power and worthiness. Those who dismiss or demean service workers are often unconsciously trying to elevate their own status because they feel fundamentally insecure about their place in the world. Their brains have learned to seek superiority over others as a way to manage internal feelings of inadequacy. Now, let's talk about what happens in the brains of people who consistently treat service workers with genuine respect. Neuroscience research reveals that these individuals have highly active mirror neuron systems. When they see someone in a service position, their brains automatically simulate that person's experience. They feel, on a neurological level, what it might be like to be in that position. This isn't just about being nice. It's about having a nervous system that maintained its natural capacity for emotional attunement. These people's attachment systems developed in environments where empathy was modeled and rewarded, creating neural pathways that automatically extend compassion across social boundaries. Here's why this matters so much for character assessment. How someone treats service workers predicts how they'll treat you when the power dynamic shifts. Research consistently shows that people who are dismissive of those they perceive as lower status will eventually treat romantic partners, friends, or colleagues the same way if they gain perceived power over them. Their neural patterns don't change based on who they're interacting with. They change based on how much power they feel they have in the moment. So when you see someone be genuinely kind to a waitress, you're not just witnessing politeness. You're seeing a nervous system that has maintained its capacity for connection across power differentials. You're seeing someone whose attachment system can handle vulnerability, both their own and others. And when you see someone be dismissive or demanding, you're looking at the early warning system of a person who will treat you the same way the moment they feel they have the upper hand. But this is just the beginning, because the second way to see someone's character reveals an entirely different and equally crucial aspect of their psychological makeup. The second way to see someone's true character is equally powerful. Observe how they handle promises and commitments. Now, this isn't just about the big promises, marriage vows, business contracts, or major life decisions. It's about the small ones, the ones that seem insignificant, but reveal everything. A promise is more than words. It's a soul contract. When someone gives their word, they're not just making a commitment to you. They're declaring something about how much they value truth, trust, and their own integrity. Watch how they handle showing up on time. Do they consistently arrive when they said they would? Or do they treat time as a flexible suggestion? Notice their response to returning calls and messages. When they say, "I'll call you back," do they follow through? Or does it disappear into the void of good intentions? Observe what happens when they commit to small favors. "I'll bring that book to work tomorrow." "I'll send you that contact's information." "I'll pick up dinner on my way home." Because character isn't built in big decisions, it's shaped in the small ones. Even the smallest promise matters. Whether it's showing up on time, returning a borrowed item, or simply doing what they said they'd do, it all counts. A person who keeps their word, even when it's inconvenient, is showing you their internal compass. Their actions aligned with their values, and that alignment is rare and precious. But equally important is how they handle broken promises. Because we're all human, we all fall short sometimes. Do they take responsibility and offer an honest explanation? Do they acknowledge the impact on others and make genuine amends? Or do they minimize the damage, blame external circumstances, and move on as if nothing happened? The way someone handles a broken promise reveals their level of emotional maturity. Not perfection, but integrity. Look for the patterns. Does this person consistently overpromise and underdeliver? Do they make commitments lightly and abandon them easily? Or do they think carefully before committing and then follow through reliably? Because someone who keeps their word in small things is likely to be dependable when it really counts. Someone who treats commitments casually will do the same when the stakes are higher. But here's what most people miss about promise keeping. It's not really about willpower or character in the way we traditionally think. What you're actually witnessing is something far more complex. and far more revealing about the depths of someone's psychological architecture. The way someone handles commitments is actually a direct window into their brain's executive functioning, their relationship with time, their capacity for emotional regulation, and yes, their deepest attachment patterns. And when you understand what's really happening beneath the surface, you'll never look at a broken promise the same way again. Now, let's dive into what's really happening when someone makes or breaks a promise. What looks like simple reliability or flakiness is actually the surface expression of incredibly complex psychological machinery. And once you understand this machinery, you'll see commitment patterns as a direct window into someone's deepest emotional architecture. When someone makes a promise, their brain has to perform an extraordinary feat. It must project into a future that doesn't yet exist and make a commitment on behalf of a future self that hasn't yet arrived. This process primarily happens in the prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive center. But here's what's fascinating. Not everyone's prefrontal cortex developed the same way. Children who grew up in chaotic or unpredictable environments often have underdeveloped executive function systems. Their brains learn to focus on immediate survival rather than long-term planning. As adults, they struggle not because they don't care, but because their neural architecture makes future thinking genuinely difficult. Conversely, people who keep commitments consistently usually had caregivers who modeled reliability. Their developing brains learn to trust that the future exists and that actions have predictable consequences. When we examine commitment patterns through the lens of attachment theory, 4 distinct types emerge. The overcommitter, or anxious attachment. These individuals say yes to everything, often making promises they can't possibly keep. Watch for the person who commits to 3 different plans on the same evening, or promises to help everyone with their projects. This isn't just poor planning, it's their attachment system, desperately trying to maintain connection with everyone. Their childhood taught them that love is conditional and must be constantly earned, so they promise anything to avoid potential rejection. Neurologically, their threat detection system is hyperactive. The fear of disappointing someone triggers genuine panic, leading them to make commitments their rational mind knows they can fulfill. The undercommitter, or avoidant attachment. These people make fewer promises and often phrase them vaguely. Maybe we can get together sometime. I'll try to make it. Let me see what my schedule looks like. This isn't lack of care, it's protection. Their attachment system learned that commitments create vulnerability, and vulnerability leads to disappointment. By keeping promises minimal and non-specific, they protect themselves from the pain of letting others down or being let down. Brain imaging shows these individuals have heightened activity in regions associated with threat monitoring when making commitments. Their nervous system literally perceives promises as dangerous. The balanced committer, or secure attachment. These people think before they commit, make realistic promises, and follow through consistently. When they can't keep a commitment, they communicate clearly and take responsibility. Their attachment system learned that relationships can handle disappointment when it's communicated honestly. Their prefrontal cortex and emotional regulation centers work in harmony, allowing them to make promises their future self can actually keep. The chaotic committer, or disorganized attachment. These individuals show inconsistent patterns. Sometimes they're incredibly reliable, sometimes they disappear completely. Their commitment keeping seems to depend entirely on their emotional state. This reflects a nervous system that never learned consistent patterns. Their caregivers were sometimes available and sometimes not, creating internal working models that are fundamentally contradictory. As adults, they want to keep promises but lack the internal consistency to do so reliably. Here's something crucial that most people miss. How someone handles time reveals their relationship with reality itself. Research shows that people with secure attachment have more accurate time perception. They can estimate how long tasks will take, because their nervous systems trust that the future is predictable and manageable. People with anxious attachment often underestimate time requirements because their emotional urgency overrides their logical assessment. They promise to quickly finish this project because their attachment system needs to provide reassurance immediately, regardless of practical constraints. Those with avoidant attachment sometimes overestimate time requirements, giving themselves buffer space to avoid the vulnerability of potentially running late or disappointing someone. When someone breaks a promise, pay attention to their physiological response. Are they genuinely distressed? Do they seem cavalier? Or do they shut down emotionally? People whose attachment systems are relatively secure show appropriate stress when they break commitments. Their nervous systems register the relational impact, motivating them to repair and do better next time. But those with damaged attachment systems either show excessive distress, anxious attachment, or minimal emotional response, avoidant attachment. Neither reaction indicates they don't care. Both indicate nervous systems that never learned how to handle relational repair in healthy ways. Understanding someone's commitment pattern tells you everything about how they'll handle relationship challenges, work responsibilities, and life stresses. The overcommitter will overwhelm themselves trying to please you but may burn out. The undercommitter will be reliable within their boundaries but may struggle with intimacy. The balanced committer will be your most dependable partner in any endeavor. The chaotic committer will be loving but require patience and understanding. None of these patterns are permanent. They're simply the current state of someone's nervous system based on their developmental history. But recognizing them allows you to understand not just what someone will do, but why they do it. And that understanding changes everything about how we relate to others and how we see ourselves. Now you might be wondering, why are these two specific behaviors, how someone treats service workers and how they handle commitments, so incredibly revealing? Why not other behaviors? Why do these predict everything from relationship success to leadership effectiveness? The answer lies in what psychologists call behavioral authenticity markers. These two behaviors work because they bypass our conscious social programming. When we're trying to impress someone important, our prefrontal cortex kicks into high gear. We carefully monitor our words, control our expressions, and present our best self. But service interactions and small commitments fly under the radar of our conscious image management. We don't think about performing for the barista or strategize about whether to keep a minor promise to a friend. In these moments, our automatic systems take over, and those systems reveal our deepest psychological patterns. Recent studies from the University of Edinburgh, involving over 68,000 participants across 263 occupations, confirmed something remarkable. How people behave in low-stakes social situations predicts their behavior in high-stakes professional situations with stunning accuracy. The researchers found that individuals who showed courtesy and emotional regulation with service workers demonstrated the same patterns in leadership roles, while those who displayed dismissive or controlling behavior in casual interactions replicated these patterns in positions of power. Here's what's happening in the brain. Both service interactions and commitment keeping activate the same neural networks responsible for empathy, executive function, and emotional regulation. When someone treats a waiter with respect, their mirror neuron system is actively engaged. When they keep a small promise, their prefrontal cortex is coordinating with their emotional regulation centers. These aren't separate character traits, they're different expressions of the same underlying neurological architecture. Neuroimaging studies reveal that people who score high on both behaviors show increased connectivity between the empathy centers and the executive control regions of their brain. This integration allows them to maintain consistent values across different contexts and power dynamics. But perhaps most importantly, both behaviors directly reflect the functioning of our attachment system, the psychological infrastructure that governs all our relationships. Service interactions reveal our capacity for connection across power differentials. Commitment keeping reveals our ability to maintain emotional bonds across time. Together, they create a complete picture of someone's relational architecture. A groundbreaking 2024 longitudinal study followed 1,200 individuals for 10 years, tracking both their service worker interactions and commitment patterns alongside their relationship outcomes. The correlation was striking. People who scored high on both measures had significantly higher relationship satisfaction, lower divorce rates, and stronger friendships. The study's lead researcher noted that these behaviors predict relational success because they reveal the two fundamental capacities required for healthy relationships: the ability to see others as fully human, regardless of context, and the ability to maintain connection across time and circumstances. However, we must acknowledge an important limitation. Cultural context matters enormously. Research comparing American and collectivist cultures reveals that while the underlying psychological patterns remain consistent, their expression varies significantly. What looks like dismissive behavior in one culture might be appropriate professional distance in another. This is why these assessments work best when you understand someone's cultural background and can distinguish between learned social norms and individual psychological patterns. When you combine both indicators, service interactions and commitment patterns, you're essentially reading someone's psychological source code. You're seeing how their nervous system responds to power dynamics and how their brain manages time-based relationships. This combination predicts not just how they'll treat you, but how they'll handle stress, conflict, leadership opportunities, and life transitions. Because these patterns don't change based on the situation, they change based on the person's underlying psychological development. Which brings us to the most important question of all: what do these patterns reveal about you? Because understanding others is only half the journey. True wisdom comes when we turn this lens inward and examine our own behavioral patterns with the same clarity and compassion. Now comes the most important part of this journey: turning the lens on yourself. Because while it's fascinating to analyze others, the real transformation happens when you honestly examine your own patterns. When you ask yourself the difficult questions that reveal not just who you are, but who you're capable of becoming. Think about the last week. How did you interact with service workers? The barista who made your coffee, the person who delivered your package, the receptionist at your doctor's office. Were you fully present in those interactions, or were you distracted, impatient, already thinking about the next thing? More importantly, what does your nervous system do when service is slow or when someone makes a mistake? Do you feel your chest tighten? Do you become irritated? Or do you naturally extend patience and understanding? There's no judgment here, only awareness. Because your automatic responses reveal the current state of your attachment system. If you find yourself becoming impatient or dismissive, it might indicate that your nervous system learned to use social hierarchy as a way to manage internal anxiety. If you over-apologize or seek excessive reassurance from service workers, your attachment system might still be desperately seeking validation. But if you find yourself naturally treating everyone with consistent respect, regardless of their role, it suggests a nervous system that has maintained its capacity for genuine connection. Now examine your relationship with commitments. Not just the big ones, but the small ones that seem insignificant. When you tell someone you'll call them back, do you? When you promise to arrive at a certain time, are you there? When you commit to helping with a project, do you follow through? And equally important, what happens in your body when you realize you might not be able to keep a promise? Do you feel genuine distress? Do you shut down emotionally? Do you make excuses? Or do you take responsibility? Your commitment patterns reveal your brain's relationship with time, your capacity for emotional regulation, and your attachment style. Over-committers often discover they're trying to manage their fear of rejection by saying yes to everything. Under-commits might realize they're protecting themselves from a vulnerability that comes with disappointing others. Chaotic committers may recognize that their inconsistency reflects an internal world that never learned stable patterns. Here's the beautiful truth. None of these patterns are permanent. Your nervous system has the capacity for change throughout your entire life. Understanding your patterns is the first step. The second step is approaching them with curiosity rather than judgment. Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But the inverse is also true. Everything we understand about ourselves can lead us to compassion for others. When you recognize your own attachment patterns, you stop taking other people's behavior personally. You realize that the dismissive person isn't necessarily arrogant. They might be protecting a wounded nervous system. The overcommitter isn't necessarily unreliable. They might be desperately trying to maintain connection. As you continue to observe these patterns in yourself and others, remember, the goal isn't to judge or categorize people. It's to understand the psychological forces that drive behavior, so you can respond with wisdom rather than reaction. When you understand someone's attachment pattern, you can meet them where they are. You can offer reassurance to the anxious, respect the boundaries of the avoidant, and appreciate the consistency of the secure. And when you understand your own patterns, you can begin to make conscious choices about how you want to show up in the world. Because the deepest character work isn't about becoming perfect, it's about becoming conscious. Conscious of your patterns, conscious of others' patterns, and conscious of the infinite potential for growth that exists in every human interaction. We began this journey with a simple question. How little do we really know about the people around us? Now you have your answer. What seemed like random behaviors, a dismissive tone with a waiter, a casual approach to promises, are actually precise expressions of psychological patterns that were set in motion years, sometimes decades ago. You now understand that when someone treats service workers poorly, you're not just seeing rudeness. You're seeing an attachment system that learned to manage insecurity through dominance. You're witnessing neural pathways that fire in patterns of self-protection rather than connection. And when someone struggles with commitments, you're not just seeing unreliability. You're seeing a brain that may have never learned to trust the future, or an attachment system that fears the vulnerability that comes with being needed. This knowledge changes everything about how you navigate relationships. It transforms judgment into understanding, frustration into compassion, and confusion into clarity. But perhaps most importantly, it reveals a fundamental truth about human nature. We are all walking around with nervous systems shaped by our earliest experiences, doing our best to connect, to matter, to be seen and understood. The person who overcommits isn't trying to be unreliable. They're trying to be loved. The person who maintains emotional distance isn't trying to be cold. They're trying to be safe. The person who struggles with service interactions isn't trying to be cruel. They're trying to feel significant. None of this excuses harmful behavior, but it explains it. And explanation opens the door to transformation. Carl Jung believed that consciousness was humanity's greatest achievement, not because it makes us perfect, but because it gives us choice. The choice to recognize our patterns, to understand others' patterns, and to respond from wisdom rather than wound. Modern neuroscience has proven him right. The moment you become conscious of these psychological patterns, in yourself and others, you gain the power to change your response to them. You can choose to see the anxious attachment behind someone's people-pleasing. You can choose to respect the boundaries of someone with avoidant patterns. You can choose to be patient with someone whose chaotic commitment style reflects a nervous system still learning consistency. And you can choose to examine your own patterns with the same compassion you'd show a close friend. Because in the end, this isn't really about reading people. It's about understanding the beautiful, complex, sometimes wounded, always evolving human beings we all are. So here's my question for you. When you look back at your own patterns of service interactions and commitment keeping, what do you discover about the story your nervous system has been telling? And more importantly, what story do you want to write going forward?